Have you ever had a dream but looked around and realized no one in your circle had achieved it? So even though you want it, there's a tiny part of you that doesn't think it's possible. What if I told you your imposter thoughts were the key to creating that dream life that you want? Well, today you're going to hear from a guest who did just that. He grew up around people who preached financial freedom but went bankrupt flipping houses. He thought freedom wasn't only unattainable, but he thought it was fake. So today he owns 70 houses and is on a year-long world grand tour with his wife, living his best life. And in this episode, we're going to dig into Aaron's messy middle to mine the gold you can use to harness your imposter to create the life of freedom you really want. Check it out. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast, the show that helps selfless high achievers use their imposter syndrome to create a life they're absolutely in love with. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead, and I am tickled to have Aaron Murphy on the podcast today. Aaron is the owner and managing partner at Redstone Development, where they work to identify single family and small multifamily properties that meet Redstone Development's investment strategy. He negotiates purchases, manages renovations, he does all of the things. But guys, what I'm especially excited about is I accidentally bumped into Aaron on a Facebook page about financial independence, and he said some stuff that just, it was like, light zooming in, and it was like, you need to have Aaron on the podcast, because Aaron's response to my question of what advice would you give yourself at 14 was just so incredible. And we're going to dig into that for a second. But first, I want to welcome Aaron to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, no, when I saw your post, we ended up chatting a bit. Didn't realize it was going to lead to this, but I'm excited to be here. And it's been looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Oh my gosh, yes, let's go. So we're just gonna, well, let me tell you a little bit for the listener about this post that I made. So I'd asked about what advice would you give yourself at 14, and you said it struck a chord. So Aaron, can you share with the audience what you experienced and what you actually said in response?
Sure. Yeah. So initially, I was just reading in a forum that I frequent pretty regularly, and when the question came up of sort of what would you tell yourself when you're 14, I started reflecting on that and thinking about what would I want to share. And so you start off with what would be the clever piece of advice that I would give to tell them the path they need to go down. And then I started realizing really there is no specific piece of advice that I needed to give myself or some tricky piece of wisdom. Really, the truth is that I have gotten to where my 14-year-old self would have wanted to get to, and really beyond what he would have envisioned. And so really what I would have given him was just a piece of encouraging advice about where we are today so that he would know to stay the path. And what I posted was just the truth is that right now, today, I'm actually recording this from Tokyo. I'm on a 1 year trip with my wife around the world. I'm running my business remotely while I'm doing that, and we're doing a bunch of bucket list type activities that she's wanted to do for a long time. I am having fun. She's having more fun, but I am enjoying it too. But basically, I would tell my 14-year-old self that this is what your efforts have achieved. And so the things you were concerned about whether you'd be able to accomplish, you've accomplished them. The things that you wondered if they were real or fake, they were real. And so I would tell them that to basically to stay the course. And so it really struck a chord with me. I'll tell you, I'm sure it will sound strange to you. I was actually crying a little bit when I was writing the response. It really struck me. But then you reached out after that, and we started talking, and I was happy to come on the show. So
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, you are so inspiring. Like, because it really is about what does your best, most loving life look like? I mean, I'm so excited to hear that you're recording this from Tokyo. Although now that I'm doing the mental calculations on the math of your time zone, I'm so sorry. But
Oh no, it's fine. I'm still jet lagged, so it's okay.
okay, great. But okay, but here's the thing. How old are you right now?
I'm 31. Yep, I'm 31.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron is 31 years old and the owner of a very successful company. He's traveling the world with his family, managing his business and inspiring you. I'm already inspired. We're like 3 minutes into this interview, right? And that's what this is all about. It's that inner thought that is saying, is this real? Is it possible? How successful am I going to be? How good can my life be, right? So often we cap out at like surviving is the thing. But you've illustrated that it is possible to get beyond surviving and thriving. And that's what we talk about here is the mindset on how you got there. So let's start from the very beginning. How did Aaron grow up? Like, tell me a little bit about your story.
Sure. So going all the way back to the beginning, I was born in Maryland, but I started off growing up in South Carolina. My family moved around a bunch. I actually went to at one point I counted them up. I think it was 15 or 16 different schools just from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I changed schools a bunch. We didn't move quite that many times, but we moved a bunch as well. And while I was moving around, I was always sort of the new kid. My brother and I, we were always the new people arriving in different situations, which I think ultimately helped me a bit in the long term because I sort of got comfortable jumping into new situations. So the first thing that sort of helped me pull myself from being that awkward new kid into sort of starting to have some identity and figuring out who I was going to be was sports. So I got really into football. I would call that the first big obsession that was in my life. I don't really follow football that closely now, but for a period of time, it was a huge deal because it helped me become strong. So I went from being kind of an overweight kid to being a strong kid, and went from being someone that didn't have anything to any way to connect to a lot of other kids and people in my age group to something where I wasn't quite popular. I wouldn't say that, but I had a friend group, I had people to interact with and things of that nature. And for a lot of years, that was the main obsession that I was focused on. I actually thought I was going to be an athlete, play in college, and these sorts of things. It turned out I wasn't good enough. Wasn't tall enough, didn't go down that path. But then ultimately I went to college at William and Mary, and I got really into debate. So that became sort of my second obsession. It went way beyond anything that was reasonable. I was literally walking around the campus, sort of re-giving my speeches and things like that while I was moving around the campus. I was able to be really successful doing the debate, and I had some success at the high school level with the sports as well, but it just didn't translate to the college level. While I was doing the debate, I really got into that, got into the public speaking, focused on that, but I focused on that so much that I nearly didn't graduate. So I had almost too much fun jumping around doing all these different tournaments. It was a strange environment. It'd be hard to even for someone to imagine from the outside. You're going every weekend to campuses all over the country, debating through the whole weekend, coming back, training through the week. But so I did that. So when I finally did ultimately graduate, I was looking to get a job. Just like everyone, I started realizing I was going to have bills and things like that to pay. So I'm trying to figure out what job to get, and I found out I basically wasn't qualified for anything, and I mean in terms of job application qualifications. So, and not in the usual sense where it's like you haven't done anything because you're just graduating college. That's everyone. I was also below the minimum grade threshold for every job. Hadn't done any internships for any job, and so my only criteria when I'm going through the job portal for my school at the time, this I guess was in 2015, was just any job that didn't have requirements. So as long as the job was just interested, just anyone could apply, I applied to every one of those. And basically the job that I ended up going into was essentially like a telemarketer role. I would describe it now as software sales, but they called it an account executive. But basically, I was going to be making calls and trying to sell products to people all over the country. And this got to, there were a few different sort of inflection points at different points in my life along the way to this, but this was, I think, one of the first really big ones on a professional level. I boiled it down to basically two different jobs. One of them was with a company that sold commercial real estate data, and the other company was, I think it was a subsidiary of the Atlantic or something like that. I was living in DC at the time. Both jobs were offering about $30,000 as a base salary. The Atlantic job was giving me a guaranteed commission of about 5 grand. The other job had no guaranteed commission, but it was uncapped upside. I viewed them as almost similar options at the time. I was thinking like, look, my bait to live, I need $32,000. This one's $35,000. Like that's a win. So that was the direction that I figured I was going to go. But then the more I was thinking about it, this sort of uncapped potential, this uncapped upside, I thought, look, I'm just going to give this a chance and see how it goes. So I go down the route of the other company, this commercial real estate data company, and I think that was a really life-changing decision that I went down that route because I started, both of them looked like $30,000 jobs at the beginning, but within about a 7 year time frame, I was up to making $330,000 a year in the software sales job. But the other job, I probably would have been up to making 42 or something like that in that period of time. So that was a huge sort of pivot. I couldn't see that at the time. I actually was dealing with a lot of embarrassment and shame because I felt that I think there's a lot of stigma about telemarketing and these things. So I viewed myself and my job very poorly because of the level of prestige that it had and these sorts of things, even though the actual opportunity in front of me was really substantial. And this debate league that I was part of, the people that were my peers, again, I was very successful in this league, the people that were my peers on that same level, a lot of them were going into Yale Law School, Harvard Law School. They were getting judge clerkships. They were even being Hill turns, which at the time still sounded more prestigious than being a telemarketer. So everything they're doing all these different things and I sort of spent a lot of time feeling like I was better than the circumstance that I was in. I'm not really supposed to be here. I'm not really a failing student. I just was focused on this other thing. That was sort of the perspective that I had, and it caused me to not really succeed that much. I couldn't apply this tool of obsession to this job because I didn't really want to be in this job, and I was sort of constantly making other plans. While I was there, eventually I just accepted I'm here, so I must not be better than this circumstance. Like this must be the level of circumstance that I deserve because of the actions that I've taken. And so I leaned into that job, and doing so was the second big, as far as career bridge point in my life. So I leaned into that job. I decided to commit to that industry of commercial real estate. I applied to get a master's degree within the field and started networking within the company and really trying to understand sales. And while I was doing that, I had an opportunity to be promoted from the inside sales role to what's called a field sales role. So this is also known as an account executive, or there's other terms that people use for this. But basically, you're now going to be either driving around or flying around to meet with different businesses and bring them into the company and then also service those accounts. So you're sort of going from selling let's call it a $84 a month product. It's on a 3-month subscription to a product that could be all the way up to $80,000 a month on a 3-year subscription. So totally different type of opportunity. Again, I viewed them as relatively similar opportunities because as I obsessed on the telemarketing role, I became the best at that. So while I was becoming good at that, I sort of viewed it as I had to take a step down to do this other job. I didn't want to take a step down. I didn't want to be the new kid again. But I said, look, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take that opportunity. And I took that opportunity. So I jumped into that, started doing the sales. While I was doing that, because the software we were selling was to the commercial real estate industry and it pertained to commercial real estate data, and I was doing this master's degree at the same time, I started really getting exposed to real estate as an investment vehicle. Growing up, I'd seen different people try to do flipping or some of these other more exciting strategies, and I'd seen them fail a lot. It was a lot of the reason why I grew up poor because of these strategies not succeeding. And so for me, the first time that I started to understand that you could run real estate like a business, managing rents and expenses and really building a business that you can incrementally work on day by day, that was the first time that I saw real estate that I could see myself potentially actually doing and being invested in. So I'm in this sales role and I'm trying to figure out what's my next move going to be? What am I going to do? I'm a young guy, I'm making some good money. How am I going to like what am I going to do? What's my path forward? Growing up, I'd always been told all this stuff about you got to build this giant business and these sorts of things because even though we grew up very poor, we were exposed to Rich Dad, Poor Dad and a lot of these different books when I was young. It just all seemed like it was kind of fake because that was what we were being told, but then we may not have our lights on or something like that. So it felt like what the most successful person that I thought I knew was my grandfather, and he basically worked a job his whole life. And that's not saying that that's bad. I'm saying that in my mind he had stability and all of this. So I'm thinking maybe that's the route I want to go. So I start watching the people around me. They're making, they've been in this career for many years. They're making good money. They look like they have good lives. And so that was sort of the path that I was going to go down. While I'm going down that path, the problem was I started having these weird moments sitting in team meetings and such where I always get it wrong if it's the third wall or the fourth wall. What's the one where
The
what's the
fourth
one where the
wall. We're like a
okay, where the
producer.
character
Yeah, the fourth wall.
yeah, yeah, where the character shows the audience, they break the story. So I keep having these moments, these team meetings where it feels like they're breaking the fourth wall, but then I feel like I'm the only one noticing it. So like we're sitting in one meeting where the manager turns and he's like, "Look, I know everyone doesn't want to be here doing all this work work on Christmas Eve. But remember, we have to be here. If we aren't here, they won't pay us. We can't provide for our families if we aren't here. And in my mind, it's like, okay, so that's the problem, right? We have to fix that. And everyone else is just nodding along, like, yep, we have to be here, so we will be here. And so it was sort of weird. There are just a lot of moments like that where it was like, clearly this isn't the correct plan, not for 40 years or 50 years. So I start looking for a different plan. I'm a very analytical person, so I won't bore you with the details, but I looked at different investment options. I looked at I started looking back at those ideas I'd heard about as a kid about financial freedom, but how do I do them in a different way that's not failing and that it's not resulting in my family suffering. I didn't have a family at the time, but if I have a family. So I started thinking through that. I looked at stocks, bonds, real estate, decided real estate was the one that I thought I could actually do in a reasonable amount of time. So I start going down the path of trying to figure out, how do you get real estate? How does someone actually get these rental properties? So I started buying properties. First house I ever bought, I lived in the basement. I made a mistake. I accidentally bought a house that really didn't have heat. So I'm living in the basement of this house with no heat while the tenants are living above me. I'm renting out the rooms. My now wife at one point was like visiting me at this house. So she has on three sweaters and all this different stuff. And there's a lot went on with that. But that was my first house. Then after that, we bought more houses, a few more, one in a year for a little while, then at a faster clip. And then basically that became my next obsession. So, the first obsession, sort of the sports, that helped me get into William and Mary. I squandered that opportunity a little bit, but I did obsess over debate. Some of the skills from the debate then helped me converting into the sales role. And then I sort of was starting to transition that obsession through to real estate. Along the way doing this, I almost lost the script at one point. I almost got sort of to the point where I was like, look, I'm making so much money doing sales. Maybe I'll just do this. There's nothing wrong with this. And then I felt that I was sort of like unjustly had an opportunity taken away from me to win a President's Club. It's sort of an annual competition for salespeople at the company. But now looking back, I can't say that it was unfair, but it was upsetting. And that sort of cemented for me that I needed to make my own path and do it my own way. So I just sort of started working through this plan to buy more and more properties. So I bought the properties over time. At this point, along the way, I also got married. That was another revelation for me, because I sort of thought that a relationship was going to be something that would be an impediment to my goals, but just for a variety of reasons. But actually, my wife's been an awesome asset to those goals, not just the financial goals, but also forcing me to stop and really enjoy life. I always joke with her, I'd still be living in that basement without heat, if it hadn't, because the math made sense, if it hadn't been for her. So I wouldn't be in Tokyo, if we hadn't done it that way. So I expanded a lot over the years. Now we have a really good business. We've got 70 rental units, or I guess 69 today. We're closing on one more near the end of the month, and we're basically just managing and growing this business over time. And I try to help other people when I can, when they're getting into real estate. And now we're on this trip. It took about a year and a half of learning to have the business run through a VA and employees and things like that. So that's sort of the current thing that I'm learning. I've put those systems in place, but now I'm learning how to manage those things abroad. So that's my that's my story. I told myself I was going to do 10 minutes. That was like 15, but that's the that's my background.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm watching a movie just in real life. This is incredible. There's so much magic there to unpack, and thank you for sharing the truth of the experience. I think to your point, you'd kind of commented early on of like, is this fake, right? My 14-year-old self is like, is Rich Dad Poor Dad real or fake? And getting to the point of, no, it's real because I made it real. And it took a lot of trial and error, and it started with a really cold basement, right? And like, it wasn't totally glamorous all the time. And we talked about shame and guilt, which we're going to unpack here in a second as well. But how inspiring. And first question is, I was kind of taking notes. And when it comes to how you define success, I'm curious what your answer would be, because initially, maybe younger you would have defined success as not suffering and stability. But what would current you define success as?
And I think you hit that on the head, and that was part of why it brought me to tears, thinking of the younger self, because I was realizing that not only would he be shocked about this trip, but he would have just been happy to know that we had a nice apartment food all the time and stuff like that. So it's striking. Yeah. So this question, how would you define success, is tough, and I think it is changing for me over time. But I think that I did some self-reflection a few years ago, and I found that what made me the happiest, brought me the most joy in a durable sense, was when I was making progress towards goals that I viewed as meaningful. So that can be different things. It can be mentoring people, it can be building a business. But I would say that to make it a little bit more concrete, it's very important to me to own and control as much as possible of the product of my work. When I was when I was in that sales job, what I basically realized at one point, we had about a 94% renewal rate on our product with a 7% annual escalation. So again, I'm a little bit of a math nerd, but I don't want to belabor all the details. The point is, every dollar that I sold for them, they're going to collect that dollar every year in perpetuity forever. And I sold about $3 million in annual contracts for them. So I started thinking, in 30 years from now, they're going to have made $90 million. Now, it's not fair to say that I'm worth, I don't want to use worth in that context. It's not fair to say that I was the driver of the whole $90 million, because they have to have a whole business and service the clients and all of this. But, they maybe paid me $1 million to sell that, right? And so it's like, well, I think I deserve more than a million, right? So I want to get whatever percentage I can of that. So for me, success is if I'm making progress towards goals that I believe are worthwhile, and I control a large percentage of that outcome, and I have time freedom sort of at the same time. Then if I can get those three things, I view that as success in a financial context, and it's sort of like giving me the freedom to enjoy life context.
Oh, yes. So, number one, I'm hearing freedom, right? Whether it's freedom to control my time, freedom to control the outcome of my career, which is really what this podcast is all about, right? It's about the freedom to create a life that you just want to pinch yourself is so amazing. And it sounds like you've definitely built that. But also the idea of you brought up these really intangible elements. And this is kind of the hard part, that when you talk about something like imposter syndrome, it's not quantitative. And I think there's a couple really basic levels of success that I actually want to run by you, because first there's 13-year-old you who's like, I just want a small apartment and like food on the table, right? So there's this like putting your oxygen mask on tier, right?
Mm,
Of like,
okay.
Maslow's hierarchy, like I got to make sure my basic needs are taken care of, right? When you secure that, then it becomes self-actualization. Like, well, how far can I take this? And how good can my life kind of get? And there are a lot of people who stop at, I got a small apartment, I got food on the table. And, a lot of times when I talk to people, they will bring up topics of like, well, when is enough kind of thing? And you see like these billionaires that want more, even though they're the richest people in the world, right? And they're miserable and all the things. And to me, I always delineate it as, if you are really content with having an apartment and food on the table and you have no desire to self actualize, there's a time and place for those people. And I appreciate them because they're just really content doing whatever it is that they're doing. But if you have a desire, and you've said this throughout your intro, where you kind of were like, there was a part of me that just wanted a little bit more, right? There was a part of me that just wondered what was possible. That's the part where we need to acknowledge we are self actualizers. And then the question
Yes.
becomes, how big is this game going to get, and how much fun can we have on this journey to knowing we're going to be successful, because we've already proven to ourselves on a smaller scale that yes, this is real. Yes, I have an apartment. Yes, I can put food on the table, but what else can we do? Right?
Right. No, that's very well said.
Yeah, but so bringing it back to some other stuff you said, you mentioned the word opportunity, I think 5 or 6 times. And when I hear people use the word opportunity, it's that indicates a very high level, very strategic mindset of, this isn't just about me, this is about a much bigger picture. And that much bigger picture includes, even when I'm quote unquote losing, I'm still actually winning, right? So an example that you gave that I'd love to point out and dig into a little bit is, you talked about the stigma around telemarketing, right? And you actually said you had shame and guilt around that position, but you were like, but then there was opportunity there. And I recognized that I was better than the circumstances I found myself in, and I was going to figure out a way to get out of that. And then even when you talked about taking that step down, right, into that new sales position, and you were like, oh, I don't want to. but you saw the opportunity there and you seized it. And I resonated so hard with that because I had moments like that too, where I was in the military for many years, and I remember one job I got where they were like, you're going to this position. And literally everybody was like, who did you piss off? Like, your career's over. Right. And I was just like, what did I do? Like, I'm in some like
Sure.
weird floor. Like, nobody knows we're there. Right. It was awful. It turned out to be the best career move of my military career because, and I very much took the position of bloom where you're planted. Right. I was just like, okay, this is where I find myself. My parents raised me to be someone who does the best I can with what I have. And I'm going to do the best I can. To this day, and it's been 15 years since I had that job, I still run into agents that are like, oh my gosh, you're Alani, you helped us with this, blah, blah, blah. And it like, this is how it blew up. And I have no clue what they're talking about. And they're
That's
like, no, no,
awesome.
no, no, it was you. So I'm curious, like, can we talk about how did you develop that mindset of opportunity where rather than looking at your immediate circumstances and just thinking, oh, this is as good as it's going to get and, it's never going to get better. How did you overcome that mindset to seize the opportunity and figure your way out of it?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. This is fun. It's helping me sort of unpack things I haven't even thought about fully. So I would say for me, very early on, I had the experience of when I go back to that experience that I mentioned about how getting into sports helped me go from being the sort of like chubby, awkward new kid to being someone that had friends and all these other things. The way that I was able to get to that was that I started lifting weights and I started doing push-ups and things like that. And it was something that didn't happen quickly. It was an incremental progress over time that then meaningfully changed my situation. Now, that wasn't that life-changing as it turns out, but it felt life-changing in the moment. And so I think I had that experience, that context, that small incremental daily improvement in progress can make a difference. One of my idols as a kid was Kobe Bryant. That was his thing that he was pitching was just this grinding, hard work type of mentality. So I think that I did have that component, that idea that you're describing of the bigger picture that things can be improved. They can be more than just what they are today. You can get to the point where you forge them into something else. I think that the part that was so hard for me was that I could apply myself in that way when I saw the opportunity as when I saw the situation as a valid opportunity, I guess I would use the term as. But when I thought it was something that was invalid or not worth my time or something like that, then I wasn't fully applying myself to it. And so I think that what allowed me to unlock seeing those situations properly was humility, and it was looking at my actions and it's basically stop giving myself excuses for why I was in this situation. It was like, look, you're in this situation because the market has to try to assess your value, and you hopefully do have more value than $30,000 a year, but you haven't demonstrated that anywhere. And so that's why you're in this situation. So what you basically need to do is try to I just saw it as I needed to climb to a situation where I could demonstrate higher value to the market. So I saw it as I'm going to make the most of each situation that I'm in. Maybe those will turn into references, maybe they will turn into mentors, maybe they will turn into I didn't realize it was going to turn into more money. I actually thought I was going to need to get out of that role, go to grad school, and that was why I was applying to grad school in the first place. But and then get into a different job is what I thought. But I think that was the challenge for me, and I think that when I embraced the truth of like my own decisions and my own choices, stop feeling sorry for myself about those things, about those choices, that's what allowed me to unlock that level of focus and determination towards the opportunity that was there in front of me. That's interesting that you're saying the word opportunity itself implies a more expansive type of thinking. I hadn't thought about that before.
Oh,
That's interesting.
100%. Yeah. So I use the Energy Leadership Index. It's like a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram or a DISC assessment
Okay.
tool, but it measures emotional output because basic psychology theory says thoughts lead to emotions, which lead to behaviors.
Okay.
But we oftentimes are running on subconscious thoughts that obviously we don't know are there, but we know they're there because of the emotion and the behavior. So when the behavior or the thought is opportunity, the actual root
Yeah.
thought is I'm winning all the time, even when I'm losing
That's
objectively, right?
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's
And so,
interesting.
yeah, and I love that because when we're in our fears, we are our bodies are going into this primal mode of survival, which is completely normal, right? And I think I appreciate that we're going down this rabbit hole because what you're demonstrating is even in the beginning of our careers, right? In our 20s, we're all a hot mess. We don't know what's going on. We want to be successful, right? Like whatever. But your body is assessing the environment all the time for how can I be successful? How can I get the resources I need to survive? And so often society labels us as like bad for wanting more, but the reality is that we can interpret each of those interactions however we want. And you can default to I'm a victim all the time, kind of. And there was a little bit of that thought process
Yeah.
maybe that went through your mind,
Yeah.
it sounds like, but you took the opportunity, right? There was a part of you, your intuition, it sounds like, that said, no, I don't think that's quite right. Let's reassess what that interpretation is into something that's more beneficial and powerful for me. And clearly it's worked out for you. So
Yeah.
I'm curious because you've had an incredible career, even though, on the outside it looks perfect on paper, but clearly there was a lot of messiness on the way to this trip to Tokyo, right? And living your best life.
Yes.
And I'm sure that there's somebody listening or watching right now that's like, but Aaron hasn't had the barriers that I've had, right? Like it sounds like he's kind of had this semi-charm life. So would you mind sharing something that maybe happened to you or a barrier that you experienced that you had no control over that you overcame and how you overcame it?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm happy to do that. I would say, just to go back to one of those inflection points when I first pivoted from the inside sales role, thinking I was going to be successful moving over to that field sales role. That transition for me was extremely brutally difficult in a way that I couldn't have anticipated. I became very good at the inside sales job, and it was the only sales job I'd ever had. So I thought I had the skills to go work in this field sales role, but in reality, it's a completely different set of skills. You're picking up a phone and just sort of calling people, dialing 80, 90 times a day. You're not sitting in front of them. They're not talking, it's a very quick transactional sale. That's completely different from going and sitting in a room with a 65-year-old that's been selling real estate for 40 years. Generally, I don't really lean too much into the race thing, but it's probably like a 95% white industry. They're talking to me about, they're talking to me about golf and all these things that I don't really have any exposure to. Not only that, there's an age barrier. Almost all of my coworkers were in their 40s and up, and when I switched into that role, I was 22. So it's completely different talking to someone about having kids, or even they're asking me what road did you take to get here? I'm like, I'm on the GPS. I don't know. They're like, oh, is it the Beltway? I don't know where the Beltway. I'm learning. I just got to the city, so it was very challenging. There was no point of connectivity for me for interacting with these customers, and not only that, but I still see it as an opportunity, but in another sense, I would say I was kind of set up to fail a little bit because the role that I jumped into, so I came in with an entry class of 10 people. Within the first year, I was the only one left in the company. Then another class comes in a few years, about within a year of that, all 10 of those people were gone, right? So then they bring in a couple people to replace those people. So you're sort of getting down to being like one out of however many people have just survived this situation. And I was put into a book of business that you're supposed to manage. And again, it turned out to an opportunity for me, but I didn't realize that the book of business that I'd been handled was essentially it was a book of business that had been pieced together of a bunch of unhappy customers, essentially. So I was being handed a situation where it was the smallest territory. It was a bunch of customers that were not happy with the product and the company. A lot of them were already sort of set to cancel. And the way that sales worked there was if a customer cancels, even if they'd been with the company for 30 years, it comes out of my sales. So I have to sell a new sale to replace their sale plus new sales. So I'm sort of in this boat with holes in the bottom, and the customers are falling out of the bottom of the boat. Turns out I don't know how to run a professional meeting at all. And so I'm sitting here trying to accomplish this. Most of my colleagues were able to go, they could do maybe 6 meetings in 2 hours, let's say, because their clients were Bethesda. My clients were spread out miles and miles apart. Like I had to drive 40 minutes just to get from one office to the next office. So really hamstrung in a lot of different ways. And not only that, the way that the product was sold, the greater opportunity was if you had higher quality companies. I had the lowest quality companies. I'm trying to hit this sales target. I don't actually know how to do field sales. I'm in the worst book of business for that area. My customers are people that can't relate to me. They can't relate to me at all. I'm driving around in this 2003 Honda Civic that didn't have air conditioning. So I'm showing up at these meetings, drenched in sweat, like through my suit, coming in like, "Hi, I'm Aaron Murphy. At 22 years old." They're looking at me like, "Who is this person?" And trying to figure out this whole situation. So it was brutally hard. And I'm sure the audience is expecting me to say, but I persevered through that and that's how I came to succeed. It wasn't like that. For the first year or two, I was sort of like floundering around. A little bit of success sometimes, a little bit of failure. I missed my quota a lot, but I didn't really realize that I was actually doing worse than I thought, but luck sometimes was buoying me up, so I was still bumping around just a little below the median. But then all of a sudden, and just to be clear, I mean in this case, real luck. I normally think about luck as being prepared meets an opportunity. In this case, it was like I really did not know how to do sales, and sometimes I would get a good sale. But in any event, after all this is occurring for a couple years, I went on a trip actually with my now wife, then girlfriend. We went on a trip for a couple of weeks to Paris, and when I came back from that trip, it sort of hit like a ton of bricks. All of the lack of skill because I did not have a really developed pipeline for sales. I had not managed that pipeline while I was away properly. The luck ran out, and I went on an extended period of 5, 6, 7 months of basically missing my targets. And I got put on what's called a performance improvement plan. And the performance improvement plan at that company, no one comes off of it. Basically, you go on, it's just a way for them to get you to resign instead of firing you. And that was what I was on. And it would have you would have thought that I wouldn't make it off of it, but I refused to resign. I refused to give up. And what I basically had to do was very similar to learning the first inside sales role. I had to just embrace the fact that I was in that circumstance because that's what my skills were, and I had to improve my skills. And I decided, look, I don't actually know how to do any part of this job, basically. I'm not good at any component of this. So what I did is I broke the job down into its component parts and I gave away all of my opportunity. So I would spend hours over a weekend making a list of prospects, and then I would come in the week on a weekday, and I would get a senior rep and say, "Hey, look, I need you to call these prospects. I made the list already. You don't have to make the list. If you get a meeting off of it, you can close the business." And I just sat there, listened to him make calls. Then when I figured out how to make calls, then I made my own calls. Then I set meetings. Now I brought a senior rep. Look, come to this meeting with me. If you close it, you keep the business. I just want to see how you run the meeting. So now I saw how they ran the meeting. I did that for every component of the job. So I went from, struggling and making some money to making basically zero money for 2 or 3 months while I gave away all of the money that I could have made to these other people. But then I learned from watching what they were doing, and then I was able to convert that into success in the long term. Where then from there, that's when the story picked up, and then I became the most successful rep in the region. I was at one point I was 24. I finished the master's degree, and then I was somewhere between 24 and 27. I became the super senior rep. I was managing all of our biggest accounts, like in that region, just to be clear, not nationally, but like a Walker and Dunlop level account I was managing because basically I became the best in that area. And so, but it was extremely painful, extremely frustrating, and a grind to get to that. So yeah, so I don't know if that
Oh my
addresses what you're
gosh,
asking, but
that is insane. And
yeah.
I love this so much. Well, because this is the reality. It's on the journey to whatever success looks like for us. There is a lot of pain, a lot of heartache, a lot of failure. But was that quote where you're not winning or losing, you're winning or learning,
Oh
right?
yes, okay, yep, I heard
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so this is the kind of data that my community needs to hear, because it's not just rainbows on the way up to being successful. It's a lot of barriers to success. And a lot of it is out of our control, right? And the average humble warrior is a total control freak, right? I mean, that's what we're good at. Like
I can
you
believe that.
call it obsessed, right? You call it obsessed, but there's something in us that says we are the best at what we do. And anything that indicates that we're not is just frustrating. And you want to figure out a way to overcome it or control it or whatever. And I actually want to touch on something that you said because I think this is one of the most important parts that is underdeveloped in a lot of folks, especially in Western society, because Western society is very rugged individualist. It's very, you literally control all of your future, but you talked about luck. So,
Okay.
so here's the thing this podcast and all the work that I do, whether it's a group client, a corporate, whatever, is there is an element of spirituality that needs to be somewhat identified or developed within an individual to really achieve the level of success and joy that we want. And I identify spirituality as something that you know to be true, even though you have no evidence to prove that it exists, right? And whether you call it God, whether you call it the universe, whether you call it luck, you said luck buoyed me. So when people say things like that, it's an indicator that you had to surrender at some point, right? Where you're like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I am not good at this type of sales. And then you
Yeah.
said, and then luck buoyed me. Like I got thrown a bone.
Right.
Right. So, do you mind unpacking that just a little bit to explain, like, what does that interaction with whatever that unknown force looks like? And it might be your intuition or your soul, right? Like, this podcast really explores the truth of how people feel about whatever that invisible force is that throws them the bone every once in a while. And I'm
Right.
curious what yours kind of looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I listened to a bunch of episodes and I was interested. I was wondering how the spirituality element would pan into this. So I would say that for me, I do think there's sort of these almost rules to the universe, or maybe principles is the way to putting them. And it'd be hard for me to, put them on a stone tablet and be
Yeah.
like, these are the 10. But I would say some of the ones that I've observed are biblical, even though that's not. I'm not big into that, but I find that a lot of times if you're just putting in a lot of effort, even if that effort isn't in the most constructive directions, sometimes that yields productive outcomes. So like for example, I may be looking to buy a real estate deal and I'm not really finding one, but I'm just getting back I'm getting back on Zillow, I'm getting back to the MLS. I'm going to keep looking at every deal for 4 hours today. I'm going to keep looking at deals. While I'm looking at those deals for 4 hours, I may get a random phone call. There's something that really happened where someone offers me a deal that's actually an amazing deal. Now, and then so they don't seem connected, but I haven't gotten that call when I'm just sort of laying down, bemoaning the situation. But when I go put in that effort, even though maybe that wasn't the most constructive force of effort, then something positive, can come out of it. Another one I found is giving. I guess I maybe should give even more now that I'm saying this, but I found that sometimes when you just sort of arbitrarily give, there is this return that comes back from the universe in some way. It's not always one to one. It's not always immediate. It's not even always financial. But I have found that even if you help in a small way, something somewhere else in your life may start going more constructively, positively, that you didn't expect. So I don't I know that as I think you mentioned that you were a Christian, so you probably say, look, that's God and that's seed time and harvest in the Bible, that sort of thing. So I don't maybe that is what it is. But those are two things that I've observed for sure
Yeah,
in
no,
my life. Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, no, I appreciate you wanting to put it in the box that I choose to believe in. But what's really important is your perspective is really fascinating to me because you're like, I haven't fully defined it and maybe you don't really think there's a need for you to define it. Your system's clearly working really well for you, right? But what I loved is you're kind of like these, I'm going to call them rules to the universe because I loved it when you said that, right? And you're like, what I have observed. So the evidence I have does indicate when I'm laying on the couch eating bonbons is not when the magical
Right.
call comes in. It's when I am intending on looking for that opportunity is when I attract that opportunity to me. And in
Yes.
different circles, that would be manifestation, right? Or something like it, where it's you put your mind, your whole being into the goal is we're getting this next deal. And while I'm looking, even though I'm going down these rabbit holes and most of them are unsuccessful, out of my control, the call comes in and it's
Yep.
magical and it's amazing and I had nothing to do with it, right? And I have similar experiences in, obviously as a law enforcement officer and somebody who works in counterintelligence, there are all kinds of magical things like that that happen. And when people ask me how we're that successful, honestly, I have to acknowledge that element of the luck or the universe intervening, where I'm just like, it wasn't totally me being a control freak. I know you want a formula to that, but there is an element of luck that is included in how we get to places. And honestly, I think it lets us off the hook a little bit in terms
Okay.
of, well, if I'm in control, then I got to hustle 24/7. Whereas if you have this element of like, there's stuff that's out of my control, that's magical, it's going to happen, or even there's stuff out of my control that isn't magical that's going to happen and it's not my fault and I just got to roll with it, and there's opportunity there no matter what.
Yeah.
And then I loved what you said about the giving, where again, that's that like really big picture view that you've got of, it's not transactional. It's not like if I'm generous in this way it's going to come back to me exactly. But I think what I'm hearing you say between the lines is, I give when I feel like it's right to give, right? When I'm giving from my heart or my soul level. And when that happens, there's no expectation of a transactional return. It's very transformational in nature of like, I'm putting this out there and like when it comes back, I know it's because there's just a bigger picture at play, right? Money is a really great tangible way to talk about this topic because people like you, right? So like this $20 bill is literal just paper and ink.
Okay. Yep.
But we ascribe the $20 of value to it, even though it's paper.
Right.
But a person like you doesn't view it as like, I have this $20 and I have to keep it. You view the $20 as, if the $20 has to go over here, it's going to go over here. The money's going to come to me when I need it and it's going to leave when I don't, right? And that's really that space where the magic happens, of whether it's a real estate deal or being generous, you're trusting that the resources are going to be available to you to create the life that you want.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's well said. And I think sometimes you don't even realize in the moment that you are giving, or you don't go into a situation even planning to give sometimes, but as the situation sort of unfolds, you end up doing that. Like I was driving at the end of the day one day, I'd finished a very long day, and while I'm driving, a lot of my investing is in Baltimore area, so Baltimore City, but also the surrounding counties. The properties in Baltimore City, it's a much harder city from a perspective of
Yeah.
crime and things like this, and the surrounding counties, a lot of them are a lot better, but take that as you will. So while I'm driving back, I get a call from a younger investor, or I guess a investor earlier in his career, and he has this concern that it's possible someone has broken into his rental property. And he's concerned about that. We have a big issue with squatters here. And I start asking him questions about it. And as I'm talking to him about it, I'm on my way home. I'm realizing he doesn't really have the tools to deal with this situation. And I'd been through this situation once before. Someone broke into one of my houses. It cost me $15,000 to get them out. It was a very serious situation. And sort of without even realizing it, I drove to the house where he had the problem. And I was like, meet me here at the house. And so we ended up going through this really involved situation where we met the neighbor. She only spoke Spanish. I take Spanish classes. So we talked to her in Spanish. We get her to let us go through her house, this person we don't know at all, to her backyard. We climb over a concrete fence in his backyard. I had tools in my car. We remove a rear window from his property, climb through the window into the house, and then change all the locks back, secure the house. Then I call one of my employees to bring a bunch of wood and such. So we secure the property. And it was just an interesting situation because I didn't think of it in the moment as giving. But the more I thought about it, it was like this, like the same way I'm scarred by that moment I had when this happened to me. For him, he's just well, he's grateful, but he'll never really know how bad that even could have been. And so it turned into giving when you didn't even plan to give. And so that's it's cool when you can help people. And it's not even it's not a plan. It's not a tit for tat. I'm not doing it to get that. It just sort of happens
Oh
sometimes.
my gosh, that story is incredible because for many reasons, but so the concept around imposter syndrome that I teach is that most often we're trying to suppress those really painful memories or those experiences or that voice that tells us we're not good enough and qualified and we're not worthy, right? But I teach people that actually you need to learn how to harness it because that's when the magic really happens. And
Mhm.
you that story is such a perfect example because you had this horrific event of when you went through this painful and very expensive process. And what you did was you shortened that mentee's timeline to success, where you harnessed this painful point to and I personally believe there's usually a little bit of healing that comes with that, right? Like when you can be generous in that way with that time and energy and those lessons. And even though he doesn't see the magic that's happening fully, right? You're like, bro, you know how much like
Right.
time and suffering I saved you? And,
Exactly. Yeah.
but the point is that like there's a part of us that usually feels something like, okay, would I want to go through that again? No, but was it worth it for this? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I was speaking with my wife about it, and I was realizing there was something unusual about it because it did cost me. It cost me time. I cut my leg going over the wall. It cost me some money, a few $100s. But in the end, I was like, in the end, it wasn't a huge cost to me, but the benefit to him was outsized, and that's something that I haven't had time to fully unpack. But it seems like sometimes there's an asymmetry in giving, not in a bad way, but it's almost like you could give something that it doesn't cost you that much, but it could be everything to the other person. And I was sort of thinking through that. But my wife was saying that maybe what it is because it did cost me a lot, just not now. It cost me a lot 3 years ago when it happened the
Right.
first time. And so that's why it is a big impact to him. But I was thinking through that. I guess those are the areas where maybe we should, whenever possible, try to give if it's not going to cost you that much, but it could really change this person's life. A kind word, a piece of encouragement,
Right.
whatever, these kind of things.
Right,
So.
right. But what a beautiful example of when you're in the middle of a sucky situation. Again, that opportunity where you're like, this is terrible and I never want to experience this again. But like, I know one day I'm going to look back on this and there's a reason why this is happening. And I'm not trying to, I hate platitudes. I'm not a platitudey person. I say that because I've lived that too,
Yeah.
and so now having that lived experience when I go through something unfun, I'm like, man, this sucks, but my history has shown one day this is going to be a blessing to others and it's going to be a blessing to me in ways I couldn't have imagined. Um, but with that being said, there's so many topics I want to cover. I would love for a couple of minutes to talk about how you started the business because you alluded to it like really quickly, but I think it's important for people to hear that you're on your way to 70 rental units like in the next week or so, right? We're at 69, which is incredible. But you also said like I grew up seeing people do these flips that weren't successful, right? So like usually because social media we see the big flashy success and we equal successful business to like you have to grow really fast, you have to be really big, like you have to do all those things like right out the outset, right? But the reality is, and I listened to some statistics, I think she was like a Yale business school like professor or something, and it's something like over 80% of businesses are bootstrapped, right? And they're
Okay.
boring businesses. They don't appear really sexy, but a lot of people are risk averse, right? So if you start small and you don't get the massive loan, or whatever, but the point is like we all have our threshold of like risk versus reward. So I'm curious, like, how did you make the decision to start your own company and what did the first few days of that look like?
Sure. No, absolutely. I'm happy to break that down. So as you noted, I'm extremely risk averse, and that was intensified by some of those experiences that I had growing up. And so for me, I wasn't going to pull the cord and jump in with nothing there. I have a ton of respect for people that do that, and a ton of respect for people also that make that work, and that's amazing. For me, I was very focused on protecting the downside, and I have this concept that I refer to it as basically demand proof from the universe. So to me, it's if I have an idea, just if I said I want to start a taco truck, right? We can't just go out and start like making tacos. We have to go out and find out, what does anyone want any tacos? So let's start with asking some people, do they want tacos? And then maybe we do a pop-up stand for tacos. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're just selling tacos hand over fist, okay, now we can consider a truck. So we've received proof from the universe that this is a real real thing. And so that's more solidified as a view of mine as the years have gone on, but that is the approach that I took here. So I started off with the W-2 income that I was making from sales. And what I began with was the lowest possible entry point that I could, which was buying a house to live in, like a single family home. I looked for a five-bedroom house so I could rent out the other rooms. And that was why I came to be living in the basement, because I was renting out the other rooms. So we're talking about a 3.5% down FHA loan that I did at that time. I think it was $11,900 out of pocket to buy that first house. I don't want to suggest that that's a small amount of money, but at least working in a sales job and all of this as a single person, I was able to save some money. I was able to save that money up. And so when I got into that first property, I then lived there for free essentially in the basement while the other rooms were being rented out. And now I added that money to the money that I was saving from my job. So I went from saving $1,000 a month to saving that plus my rent. So now I'm saving $2,200 a month. And then that money I started stacking, and then I started using that to buy the next property and the next property. I didn't do anything HGTVE at all at the beginning. They were all just regular houses you could have seen on Zillow. Some of them were either duplexes or triplexes in smaller markets away from and it one town called Hagerstown, it's an hour and a half north of DC, different areas. But that was the idea. It was the most boring, methodical way you could go about doing it. I mean boring in the sense that I didn't go raise a bunch of capital or like go get a HELOC or something, but it was methodical and incremental that I sort of grew that way. And what I also did at the same time is I started off buying houses that didn't need any work at all, and then I slowly started adding small amounts of work. So it was like, okay, this house is perfect, but it needs to be painted. This house is great, but it needs to be painted and it needs some lights. And so I slowly started dabbling in learning some construction and things like that. Although I found out later really didn't know meaningful construction, but I learned more. I learned some of it that way along the way. And so as the years went on, I just bought a few properties at a time and a few properties at a time until I reached a point that the income from the business was enough to cover my what I viewed as my basic necessities. It wasn't covering the life that I really wanted to be living, but it was covering enough that I felt like I wasn't going to be like I didn't have kids. I still don't have kids, but I didn't have kids at that time. But I felt like if I had kids, they would have lights, they'd have food, this all this sort of stuff. And that was when I was willing to take the leap into trying to do this full time. So that's when I left the W-2. And it was really interesting because, again, I'm a very analytical and math person. So what I was looking at was initially at what point, so I was making, $330,000, I think my last year at the W-2. And I looked at that compared to real estate. I was like, man, it's going to be a long time before I can make anything comparable to that over here in real estate. And then, but I was sort of lying to myself because in the back of my mind, I knew the real comparison is not the 330 versus trying to make 330. The real comparison is if I was making 330 and buying real estate, it's that compared to being out on my own, right? That's the true fair comparison. And I sort of didn't want to acknowledge that because I was like, that'd be really hard to do. I can't think about that. So I jumped into doing it truly full time, and that's when it became more of a business. There's a strategy, and there's a bunch of videos about it on the internet. I didn't invent this called the BRRRR strategy. And the basic idea is that you're trying to use the same money to buy the next house and then use the same money to buy the next house. And if you can sort of effectively do that strategy, then you can buy as many properties as you want to buy. So when people hear, 70 units, they may think, well, he must have had $30 million. Like, how did he it's not the case. I basically seeded that business with about $100,000, which again, not suggesting it's not a lot of money, but I was able to save that money over the years that I was working in that sales role. So I was able to save that money over those years. And then that same $100,000 I basically turned over and over and over again to create the portfolio that I'm talking about now. So when I went into doing it full time, I had to learn construction. I had to learn how to manage the rentals really myself because I've been using third party management, and so I had to learn to do it myself. And interestingly, I almost went out of business in the first year. Not out of business in terms of going bankrupt. I almost lost the whole $100,000 because I went into basically three deals in a row where I thought I knew the construction cost and I was wrong. The first one was about a $20,000 mistake. Next one was about a $40,000 mistake. And then the third one, I was just getting started in it, and I realized it was about a $90,000 mistake. And so that was really scary for a lot of, it wasn't scary in terms of I was going to be starving, but it was upsetting because there's some ego involved. You feel like you left the company, you don't want to go back. Your wife is expecting that you're going to be able to figure this out and all this other stuff. So it was a scary situation, and I sort of I'm very much a the way out is through type person. So what I did is I went and hired some day laborers to work on the house, and I went and worked with them. So I literally started going to the house and doing full-time construction with these people. And then when they would leave at the end of the day, I would work like late into the night. When they were gone on the weekend, I would work through the weekend, whatever it was we were doing, painting, these sorts of things. And I viewed it as a way of saving money in that moment. But what it also did is it caused my construction knowledge to go way through the roof. And I realized when this was over that I actually now knew more. It's not a point of comparison. I'm not, but I knew more about construction than people that have been in the business 10, 15 years because they've been hiring other people. They may know approximately what it costs to paint a house, but they don't know that we need 4-inch nap rollers. They don't know that if we want to cut around the ceilings, the best way to do that is to get a 6-foot plastic bench and set that up in the property. They don't know that the best rollers are the microfiber white rollers with the green striations running through them because they don't drip as much. Like I know construction down to the weeds. Like what type of drop your elbow do I want in my shower? I know every single nuance now with not on HVAC and a few other trades, but on most things. And so that ended up being a type of fuel that then allowed me to take off in a way that I wouldn't have really imagined because I took those skills and basically built my own construction team so that I was able to do like I could do a renovation that would cost someone else $60,000 now for $40,000. And that allows me to outbid them when I'm trying to get the house. So that sort of is where I sort of began to be able to move faster. And we went from buying maybe 2 properties a year or 3 properties a year to maybe 7, and then at one point 15. And then this year I think we bought maybe like 20 or something like that throughout the course of the year. So it sort of started to snowball, but at the beginning was very painstakingly slow and difficult. So I think that got to your question, but I didn't jump all the way in. I started very small, and then I demanded proof from the universe. And as I got that proof, I put more and more investment into it, and then that was kind of the
Oh
approach that I
my
took.
gosh, that is incredible. And I love that phrase, demanded proof from the universe. We're going to trademark that, Aaron Murphy. We're going to put it on the
There you
podcast.
go.
I love that
You
so
heard it here
much.
first.
But what an insanely amazing journey. And there's that, you didn't say the word, but opportunity again,
Oh, sure.
right?
Yep.
Of and this is why I call the podcast the Humble Warrior Podcast, because a lot of people would think I'm not going to denigrate myself and do construction work, right? That's beneath me. But for you, you're like, there's opportunity here. I'm going to figure this out.
Right.
And
Right.
not only did you figure it out, but you along the way encountered the surprise blessing of now I have all this knowledge about construction and it's benefited me in massive ways, all because I humbled myself. I looked for the opportunity. I did what needed to get done, right? There's a time to like muscle through, and then there's a time to trust the demand proof from the universe. And you did all of it. I'm actually going to link the BRRRR strategy because that is a really common one that works really, really well. And I'm sure you've piqued their interest on that. When did you guys buy your first house, or when did you buy the first house?
I bought the first house in 2016. Yep.
It's not even been 10 years, and you have almost 70 rental units. That's insanely amazing. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the example of the person who did it and did it the quote unquote boring way. He bootstrapped his way to it. He thought and believed that it was possible, that he could do it and he was worthy of it. We've actually gone over, but I just would love to put a beautiful bow on this. Aaron, can you tell people how amazing it feels to create this life of freedom? Like, what does this feel like for you guys?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's still something I'm adjusting mentally to even being on this trip. It's been so many years of just grinding and grinding. It's given me a lot of time now to reflect and to think about some of these things that you're asking me about, like how do I define success? What do I want to be next? I'll tell you that uh it feels amazing to know that now I can create experiences for my wife that are beyond things that she would have ever thought she was going to do. I mean, she thought she would have a good life, but a year abroad, these are things that she probably hadn't even considered doing before. And so that feels you get a huge rush from that. Maybe that's the provider in me. Maybe there's something like that going on. But I think what it feels like is like the world is very open. It feels like whatever, and I'll tell you a story. When I growing up, the only trip I'd ever been on was to Canada, and it was by car, and we didn't have passports, and it was weird at the border. They almost didn't want to let us cross the border. It was a whole involved thing. But when I was 22, around the time I was starting in that job, I went on a trip to Iceland with some friends. And about 5 or 6 minutes after the trip began, we were riding four-wheelers through the mountains in Iceland. And when we were doing that, I got off one of the four-wheelers and I sort of walked out on this outcropping of rocks. And I was crouched down, and the wind is just like blowing in my face and like just whipping past me. And I'm looking down, there's this huge drop off. And I just felt extremely alive in that moment. And I remember having the concrete thought in my mind that whatever happens now, however fun my life is, or however sucky it is, or whatever, or how rewarding it is, or if I succeed or don't succeed, it'll be my decision. It'll be because of my actions. It's not going to be because for a while my life story was basically things have been hard because this parent made these decisions, and that's my life. But like that's not going to be the determining factor. It's not going to be the fact of these decisions this person made, or that I moved around a lot. All these things are going to go away, and it's only going to be because of my choices. And that's how it feels. It feels like I'm sort of in the realization that I had then. I'm in that now, where the whole world is open. I could choose, where do I want to live? How do I want to live? How big do I want this to go? Do I am I already where I'm going, or do I want to have 1,000 units, or do I want to do something else altogether? Do I want to stop and make a media company? I could do anything, and it just feels totally open and totally free and totally like it puts a burden back on me now to figure out what I actually want, and that's what I'm working on now because everything is possible.
Oh my gosh. And that is so inspiring. And actually, that is the downside of opportunity is when the world feels this open, you see all of the opportunities and you're like, I don't know which one to pick. They all look amazing, right? And so it's
Yeah.
actually a paralysis by analysis. But if I could leave you with kind of a parting thought, because this has been incredible and super inspiring today. My husband and I have been having these types of conversations because, as military members, like we've been to countries where they don't have the openness that we do and the ability to create these lives and these opportunities, right? America, she's not perfect, right? But
Sure.
to me, she's still the best opportunity in place to create stories like yours. And to be honest, I think people like us who are more on the financial independence side and the ability to create that freedom for ourselves, I think us setting the example of like what is actually possible and can we actually build it is the thing that the country needs to, and the world, frankly, to really say, well, if they could do it, maybe we can do it too. And additionally, you've already outdone yourself. Like you've done exceptionally well, objectively, statistically, emotionally,
I
all the
appreciate it.
things. You know, it's just, it's hard actually self actualizing and creating something even bigger, right? But I think that's kind of our duty a little bit as this generation, right?
Mm.
In the midst of all the turmoil that's going on in the world. And I hope that doesn't feel like a burden. I hope it just kind of encourages and gets the wheels going because there are so many Americans that don't leave the country and they don't have the perspective that international travelers have of like, actually, we're really lucky to have been born American. You and when you get out of the survival mode and you get to self-actualization, and then you're like, how good can it really get? And so many of us feel unworthy of that question. It's like, well, who am I to want more, right? But you know what's funny? Again, why I call this the Humble Warrior podcast? Because when I asked you, what does it feel like? Like, how amazing is this? You actually didn't talk about yourself. You talked about your wife. you were like
Okay, I see
you
that.
were
Yeah.
like my wife, like I'm so thankful I get to build this life with my wife and she can go do all these things, right? The joy that you get from seeing your wife in Tokyo like doing her thing, right? It like that brings you joy. And that's exactly the point of the Humble Warrior podcast is for people like us, it's never about us. it's
Yeah.
always about a much bigger picture. But in order for us to create these solutions and opportunities and these thought practices for folks, we have to have the courage to self-actualize within ourselves. And oh my gosh, Erin, I'm so thankful that the universe conspired to make this happen because you've inspired me. I feel so full of joy and encouragement. And now I'm
That
like,
makes me happy.
I'm going to go. Like, what are we going to build? Oh, and actually, in the same vein of your Tokyo trip, don't tell my husband, but I bought tickets to a Seahawks game for Saturday and he has
Oh,
no
yes.
idea.
Oh,
Like,
that's
so
awesome.
I'm literally like Saturday morning going to be like, we need to get on a plane in 90 minutes. Like, pack your stuff. We go
Oh,
into the game.
you don't even live in
No,
Seattle.
no, we have
Oh,
to
wow.
take a
Okay.
plane. Yeah, we have to take a plane
Oh, that's awesome.
because we're in that, we're experimenting, right? Like
Yeah.
demand proof from the universe. Like you said, I'm like, universe, this is a little uncomfortable for me, but
Yeah.
I believe you have good things for us. And I need proof that like, it's not about just living your best, like most luxurious life, but like this brings my husband joy. The Seahawks
Yeah.
joy. And so I'm like, yes, I want oysters for dinner. You can't get those in Montana. So we're going to Seattle and we're going to have oysters and you're going to go to your game. So,
That's
guys,
great.
oh my gosh, Erin, thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you for the gift of your time as well. I know we went a little bit over, but
No,
if you
that's
have
totally fine.
any parting thoughts or words for my community,
Yes, I would just say whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. For me, obsession has been a tool that's helped me get there. But whether or not you think of yourself that way, or if that's how you want to approach things, I would say that the core concept under that is being detail oriented. Whether you consider yourself obsessed or not, try to be detail oriented. I run into a lot of people who say, "I'm not a details person. I'm an idea guy. I want to work on the big picture." All successful people are detail oriented. Even the ones that are concept based, like a Steve Jobs, they're detail oriented about the big concept. You have to be detail oriented about the things that you care about and that you want to succeed. And so if you're able to do that and do that over a significant period of time, you're gonna see results. It's just one of these principles in the universe.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, absolutely incredible. And if people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. It's just Aaron Murphy. And I'm happy to talk to people. A lot of times people reach out to me about real estate, but this touched on a lot of different topics. So if there's anything that I can be helpful in regards to, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Aaron. We're going to link his LinkedIn and Facebook in the show notes. So check that out if you guys want to connect with him. Thank you, Aaron. This has been absolutely incredible. And guys, if you are looking for more resources, if you're inspired by Aaron and you're like, what is my purpose? Like, where am I going? Check out my life purpose exercise freebie on my website, mightysparrowcoaching.com. There are video prompts to guide you, or you can check out my best-selling book, The Least of Us, How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. And guys, remember, the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey to discover how you can harness your imposter to work for you. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us, How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.